Welcome to the 2024 Smithsonian National Education Summit. This session is a special pre-recorded opportunity to connect with education resources and initiatives. The presentation is also part of a larger lineup of over 40 sessions that include Smithsonian educators, classroom teachers, and leading education organizations and partners. This session is part of the Using Arts to Connect Past and Present track, which demonstrates the role of art in mirroring historical events, social movements, and cultural shifts. Welcome to Think Digitally, Art, Design, and Digital Experiences. I am joined by the digital team at the Smithsonian Science Education Center. And as we introduce ourselves today, we hope that you'll see how you might see some applications for the students in your lives. The Smithsonian Institution is the largest museum, education, and research complex with the mission of the increase and diffusion of knowledge. As one of the centers at the Smithsonian Institution, the Smithsonian Science Education Center serves as the education outreach arm for all of the science, the collections, and the research at the Smithsonian. So the ways that we go about this outreach at our center is through the development of curriculum, professional development, and freely available research guides for educators, and freely available digital experiences in the shape of games, educational simulations, digital videos, and more. And the mission of the Smithsonian Science Education Center is transforming K-12 education through science in collaboration with communities across the globe. And the framework for all of the work that we do at the center is based on these three pillars: innovation, inclusion, and sustainability. So how do we bridge these three pillars and create digital experiences for students? How can we make digital experiences from the ground up that take into consideration a global audience and help students discover, understand, and act in their local communities? These are the questions that the digital team explores in our work. We collaborate through art, design, and digital experience to promote STEM and STEAM education. From high concept all the way to the day-to-day production, this close team considers every element of what is published digitally at the Smithsonian Science Education Center and how it can be the best experience for our audience. So personally, my name is Logan Werlinger. I began my career as a journalist and multimedia producer, and way before that, I was encouraged in the classroom to find unique ways to engage with science and other subjects that I may have had a harder time grasping. I carried that with me all the way to college, where I studied photography and eventually used video to tell science stories and design and data visualization to connect audiences to complex topics. So with that, I'd like to pass it to my colleague, Sofia.
Thank you, Logan. Hi, my name is Sofia Elian. I'm the lead graphic designer and UI UX designer at SSCC. I began with a fine arts background as a teenager with a curiosity and love for nature, science, and art. I studied graphic design in college and brought all my interests together as I began working at the SSCC 5 years ago, developing scientific educational games and illustrations for students. I'll hand it over to my colleague, Victor.
Thank you, Sofia. Hi, my name is Victor Lucena. I'm the learning designer and digital developer at SSCC. And I think my love of learning really came from finding these sort of intersections between different fields, specifically the ones in more sort of technical realms and the ones that more in the sort of social and sort of creative and artsy realms. And so, yeah, this is something I'm really passionate about, from getting a degree in computer science to then getting a master's degree in education. That's really all me just sort of trying to find those connections and create things in that space. And I'll pass it off to Hannah.
Hi, my name is Hannah Osborn. I'm a project manager in the Curriculum, Digital Media, and Communications Division of Smithsonian Science Education Center. I joined the Smithsonian after getting a graduate degree and working in healthcare for a number of years. After a number of years, I really thought I wanted to move into the education side of science, and now I work on curriculum and digital media assets such as ebooks and videos. And I will send it back to Logan.
Great. So where does all of this work go? Our work takes many shapes to get to the end user. Today, we'll explore our process in implementing art and design in our games and simulations, our digital videos, and our ebooks. And what does our work look like?
Here are some examples of these interactives that feature data collected from Stry, characters inspired by animals at the National Zoo, music from folkways, and more. From Tammy the Golden Lion Tamarin to the data visualized in Whale Protection Corps, these are clear examples of our pan-institutional efforts to take this research and make it accessible to students and meet them in the classroom with visually engaging and dynamic interactive content. And as the senior graphic designer, I think they look pretty good. If you're interested in learning about these games more, email us afterwards. We'd love to talk to you about them. But if you're shy, we do have a QR code at the end of this presentation, so stick with us. Now we'll talk about storytelling through art. Our digital interactives are one of our many examples we have of how we storytell through art here at SSEC, and some of my proudest moments of art and design. As Leonardo da Vinci said, to develop a complete mind, study the science of art, study the art of science, learn how to see, realize that everything connects to everything else. Whether it's communicating a scientific phenomenon, various programs, or our center's mission, art is a major component in telling these stories. Art is a way to help represent and visualize abstract concepts, make complex ideas relatable, and find itself at the intersection of many disciplines. For example, STEAM. Next slide, please. In order to represent abstract concepts, such as our center's mission or a people's culture, having a deeper understanding of the fundamentals of art is a good place to start. In our annual report, I use the fundamentals of shape and line to visualize our mission's pillars: innovation, inclusion, and sustainability, to simply and effectively create a language of meaning acting as a through line for the stories, as well as embodiments of their respective missions. For example, to visualize the concept of sustainability, the sphere designed gives the impression of the inner rings of a tree that has lived a long life, inspiring readers to work toward environmental longevity through sustainable action. In our game Pick Your Plate, we use both audio and visual art forms for the 7 different countries to represent their cultures. Collaborating with subject matter experts on each country, we created a space for students to feel immersed in that country while they learn about the different nutritional requirements and standards of each place. Art is also a great means of making complex ideas relatable. Through visual representation of the diversity in youth of our Y STEM activities, we can inspire and encourage girls of different backgrounds and experiences to join the world of STEAM as they see themselves in these characters. The characters tell the story of the activity on each cover in an illustration of them experiencing the phenomena they are studying. It can be hard to visualize an activity or phenomena without some help, and these illustrations help students feel like the materials are more approachable, especially for the audience age group it's focused on, which is middle school. Now, I spoke a bit about how cross-disciplinary the world of art is, but there was a resource developed here that goes into even more depth on that subject, and that's my masterclass on the intersection of art, design, and science. A resource for both students and teachers to learn more about the tools in these fields and the way to meet each other. A resource for both students and teachers to learn more about these tools in these fields and how they meet each other in our everyday life. Scientific and phenomenon representation can be tricky business. In close collaboration with our game developer and curriculum developers, I'm able to translate the module and phenomena to meet the targeted age group, capture the accuracy of the phenomena, and visualize it in a fun and exciting way to engage students with the concepts more. Creating art for a digital interactive experience is different than for layout and print experiences. We're still telling a story, but this time it's in the form of actions, responses, and environmental cues. This involves strategic thinking through design. So how does the design process start for the digital learning experience? Well, it involves many things, primarily close collaboration with the game developer. We collaborate on many aspects of the design process, The roles I go in more depth on include user interface and user experience design, which are practices that involve designing an interactive experience for specific audiences in the most effective and legible way. User play testing, a crucial step of iteration and testing that ensures our interactive and story makes sense as students reach their learning goals. Storyboarding, visualizing the story as design, storyboarding, visualizing the story as it develops and building the base for us to illustrate and develop upon. Development and design strategy, as well as asset design, which is making the art, my favorite part. Additionally, understanding the learning goals and standards the students are focusing on is really crucial to keep in mind at every stage of development. And that's where Victor comes in as our learning goals liaison. Building a design strategy to kick things off is key. Outlining our timeline, planning our brainstorming sessions, understanding our scope and resources all play into that and can be reflected in the form of documents, which is not super flashy, but does the job. Without proper planning, you can miss important aspects of the learning experience and storytelling flow. Before I illustrate all the fun, beautiful art you see in our interactives, I need a strong guide to direct the art vision and story being told. How we do that involves tools like wireframes, storyboards, and user flowcharts. A wireframe helps determine the layout, content, and functionality of the design, leading to a storyboard that helps visualize and represent the experience more accurately to build on. As you can see in this example, here's a zoomed-in view mapping out the paths the students will take in Pick Your Plate. A user flow chart is the sequence of actions and responses in the interactive that lead the student to their learning goal. We're able to see these moments of learning through this interactivity, moments of reflection, and moments of frustration and difficulty, giving us the ability to tell the story in not just visuals, but also action. This marriage of visual and function is how design is used at SSCC as our primary storytelling tool. I'll be handing it over to Victor now to discuss the learning goals aspect of how we storytell through design.
Thanks, Sophia. So as we get into that design process, what remains our North Star and often our very first step is really pinning down what the learning goals are, what we're trying to achieve with the interactive we're creating. Luckily, we don't need to start from scratch. We use a lot of science standards to sort of help give us a baseline from where we start. Two that we use very often are the next generation science standards. This is a set of standards that are science for the classroom curricula that we develop at SSCC use very heavily. And so we're able to lean on the curriculum developers of those curricula to sort of lend their expertise on those. We also have curriculum developers that work with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And so very often we lean on them for how we can sort of design for those more long-term science goals. And with all of those as a baseline, then we really need to sort of find the balance between what exactly we want to hit and what do we want to skip out on. What's sort of important, one of the more important things that we need to decide on or find the balance between is designing for the classroom, that is being an interactive that is part of a larger curricula that's meant to be done in classroom, versus being a standalone asset that somebody could stumble upon on a website and play and still get a meaningful learning experience. Very often this ends up being a yes and rather than either or. But finding exactly what the balance of these two goals in our design is really important. From there, we also need to decide on whether we hone in or branch out. Very often there is a specific phenomena that we're trying to capture that is sort of paramount to what our learning goal is. But what's the sort of the fun of learning, and specifically science, is that any single phenomena has so many other topics and related subjects around it. And so deciding, do we try to reflect those as well in our simulation or game, or do we try to sort of hone into one specific idea and conveying that more clearly is something important that we do at this stage as well. And last but definitely not least is really making sure that whatever we're creating, it's leaning towards the affordances of this interactive media. That is, if we're creating this experience, if we're trying to capture this idea, we need to make sure that this idea wouldn't be better captured in a video or an image or a story. We really want to make sure that we're leveraging the fact that this is an interactive media and capture the sort of learning goals that is sort of uniquely equipped to tackle. And so with that, we go into the process of really developing these digital experiences and our thinking behind that. We'll go into these points in more detail on the other slides, but to sort of give a general overview of the process, it begins with researching, really making sure that we gather enough information to develop what we need to develop. And then it's cycles upon cycles of prototyping and prototyping and prototyping. Whenever you make a prototype, even if you have all the planning that we've done in the prior stages, a lot of tiny design decisions get made in this stage. And so rather than always designing for, the prototype that looks the most like the final product, we make sure to design for prototypes that answer the questions that we have about what will make this the most effective, which involves a lot of being open to change. And I'll quote Warren Spector here. He said, "Be open to change. Anyone who tells you that when you get to the end of pre-production, you've got a script and nothing changes has never made a game." And honestly, I think that's true for the creative process in general. So here we make sure we set up the moments for play testing and find the problems in the design and make those tweaks as we go along. So let's get into a little bit of that first stage of how we really do research and how that sort of applies to our first round of prototyping. A great example is what we have shown here. This is the sort of early prototype of the safe landing simulation. Its main goal is to sort of capture the phenomena of how the orbiter from the Space Shuttle Discovery, how it's able to land safely back on the ground after moving at incredible speeds in orbit around the Earth. Figuring out exactly how that's done required a lot of research, finding a lot of real world values like the drag and lift coefficients of the actual Discovery orbiter. And this prototype was really just sort of capturing all of that data and understanding that we had, throwing it all together in a simulation to see, can we more or less accurately simulate the physics of what happens as this orbiter re-enters the atmosphere, enough that more or less what we think ought to happen does. If we, balance our angle like the astronauts or the computer on Discovery needs to do, are we able to land safely? The answer to that ended up being yes, but I think a more important lesson we got out of this is this level of detail didn't make for the best end product, especially for the learning goals we're trying to hit. And I think this is an important lesson. Very often we, it might be, very often it might seem like the more accurate you can create your simulation or your game, the better it'll be. But that's not always true, right? It can very well be the case that if you continue to add more and more sort of confounding aspects of the phenomena, the core of it doesn't really get translated and sort of gets muddied. Much like a science experiment, right? You control certain parts of reality to better understand the parts that you leave open. And so that's what we try to do moving forward with these sort of prototypes. Getting into a bit more of how that prototyping happens, here's sort of two different stages of another one of our sims, Rainfall Sandbox. This simulation is all about the phenomena of orographic lift. That's the idea of when the water from an ocean evaporates into the sky, gets pushed inland by wind currents, gets pushed up into the atmosphere by mountain ranges, and leads to all of that moisture coming down as precipitation on one side of the mountain range, leaving the other side completely dry. California is a great example of that phenomena. And so with this sort of early prototype, we wanted to answer two questions. One, is more or less the way we were trying to visualize that phenomena, did that sell the idea? Did it make sense what was going on? As well as in the idea that we had of how to simulate this phenomena, did that work effectively? And the answer to that first one was yes, absolutely. It seemed like more of this idea of actually showing the clouds going in, being pushed into the air, definitely made the idea very clear. Definitely not as clear as the final product with all of Sofia's lovely finalized art assets, but it was definitely in the right direction. The back-end simulation, on the other hand, worked, but because we wanted the game to really be a sandbox where you can change a lot of aspects of the game and it would still react to those choices dynamically, the way we were simulating it, more or less with these sort of particles of water behind the scenes, didn't really lend itself to a better experience. And so we ended up doing something a little bit more sort of like rigid in the final version, that ended up making it a lot easier to tweak and design to make sure that no matter what you choose, it showed something consistent and realistic. That, of course, isn't very much shown in the final version, but it's there in the back end and was an important step of the design. Getting into what tools we use, for early prototyping, I like to use a library that's actually accessible through many different programming languages called processing. Here I'm using the JavaScript variant, which is called p5.js. The reason I bring it up is because I find it a very useful tool for making very quick visual sort of prototypes extremely quickly. But it also is a very useful learning tool if you are curious about, getting into programming, especially if you're trying to move on from block-based coding into more typed-out coding. Processing is a great library because whatever language you want to learn, it works for it, and really just gives you just what you need, the ability to draw some rectangles on a screen, and then from there you can, create whatever your mind can come up with. For our final versions, we use Unity, which is a bona fide game engine. And it's very useful, sort of giving us a lot of core building blocks so that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. But most importantly, it allows us to create one single project and launch it on several different platforms. So we have our games on our website, we have our games on the Android and iOS app stores, without having to make 3 totally different versions of the same sim. And now we get into the fun part, movement and animation. So this often happens much later in the development life cycle, where the assets are in. We're sort of doing our last rounds of play testing, and Sofia does a lot of work during this period of really trying to find out, is the UI and user experience working? Are there any sticking points? Is there any information that isn't being conveyed as easily as we might want it to be? And very often when we find these little sticking points, a very useful tool we have in our tool belt to solve those are movement and animation. So the animation we have there at the top right is a great example of that for Rainfall Sandbox. We used to have sort of very static button there that allowed you to change the land to a mountain or a flat land or an ocean. But yeah, it didn't really convey exactly what it did until you press the button and sort of just figured it out. And so in an attempt to make that a bit clearer, we decided to use actual text and have this sort of carousel effect that made it clear what your current selection is, but what the other options are that you can swap to. Also there with our safe landing, that's sort of a more final version. And I want to bring your attention to the difference between when the space shuttle is in high altitude versus low altitude. You can see the background sort of changing color, but you can also see the particles whizzing by in a slightly different way. They're a little bit slower in the lower atmosphere, but there's definitely a lot more of them to sort of show what the wind is doing at that time. So how is all of this done? Well, this is my favorite part because a lot of this, this part of the design process of trying to get into the heads of the user and figuring out how we can better convey through visuals the ideas we want them to know. in the back end ends up just boiling down to creative use of math. For example, that sort of carousel effect, that idea of it almost looking like it's rotating into the screen, isn't actually done by using any sort of 3D effects. It's actually all just trigonometry. If anybody told you that trigonometry is about triangles, it is, but it's also about circles. And so simply using a sine function to drive how up and down we shift those buttons, we're able to make it look like it's rotating. Similarly, with the particle system in Safe Landing, we basically take the variable that changes how thick the air particles come and linearly interpolate, or LERP, to the altitude. So basically we say when the altitude is high, the density of the particles are low, and when the altitude is low, the density of the particles are high. That sort of worked, but also didn't really sell the idea. The particles sort of felt like they came in all at once and then didn't really get that much thicker further down. And this is both a visual thing of, how we perceive thickness of particles, but also really related to real life, where the atmosphere doesn't linearly get thicker. It gets thicker almost all at once when you're really at the lower part of the atmosphere. So rather than doing it linearly, we threw a couple of exponents in there, did a little x squared, and created a much better experience of feeling like higher atmosphere was really empty. And then once you really start getting into the lower atmosphere, all the particles sort of came in. Yeah, that's one of my favorite parts of this job, of being able to use these more technical, mathy concepts to tell a story and convey the ideas we want to convey. And with that, I'll hand it over to Hannah.
Thank you, Victor. Now we're going to shift to a couple of Smithsonian Science Education Center's other digital resources, ebooks, and videos. The Smithsonian Science Education Center has both an ebook and video series. You can see them both on the screen here. They are the Stories of Women in STEM ebook series and the Diverse Stories of Resilience video series. These QR codes will take you to our website, where you're able to view, download, and watch the videos and ebooks. The Stories of Women in STEM ebook series and Diverse Stories of Resilience video series are geared towards middle school students and are designed to highlight the often overlooked role of women in STEM. As Victor and Sofia mentioned with our games and simulations, the first thing we look at is really identifying our learning goals. So when we get to development, what are those learning goals? For the ebooks and videos, the first goal is Introduction to STEM Careers. Our ebooks are organized around a particular field of study. You see both the Stories of Women in STEM Space and Stories of Women in STEM Biotechnology on your screen now. Those are just two of the themes in our series. And then the Diverse Stories of Resilience video series focus on resilience of people and their personal stories. The ebooks features biographies of 9 to 14 women who make history through their scientific discoveries and innovations. And a couple of the other themes are symbiosis and energy. The next learning goal is representing diversity. The ebook and the video series highlight ethnic diversity, geographic diversity, as well as career diversity. We really focus on the see-do theory. If readers of the books are able to see themselves in the interviewees, then they will be able to believe they can do that too. It's really trying to inspire the next generation in STEM fields. And as part of the ebook series, we also have a Stories of Women in Color in STEM. The next learning goal is to highlight overcoming adversity. When we interview women in the video series and ebooks, they focus on what kind of struggles they had in their career. Many of the women have really impressive stories of how they defied gender and racial stereotypes and overcame structural barriers within the STEM fields to achieve their goals. The ebooks also highlight mentors. The video series and ebooks really talk about family and people in their lives and mentors of teachers that have supported them or inspired them. We really want readers and viewers to understand the power of mentors, as well as how important it is to have support in your goals. And finally, some of the ebooks, such as Stories of Women in STEM at the Smithsonian in Biotechnology or Energy, pair with our Smithsonian Science for Global Goals curriculum resource guides. This is a way to make both the videos and the ebooks part of an even larger learning experience. So after we think about the learning goals, we then move to design and accessibility of the ebooks and the videos. We want to inspire as many people as possible. And so how do we do that? We incorporate the design to make them accessible to students. We want them bright, we want them colorful, we want them fun. We don't want it to be a dry biography of what they think of like a very large textbook. So we also have it at a middle school reading level. This allows middle school students and high school students to be able to read the books on their own. It also allows younger students to take the books home to have them read by a caregiver or family member, or have them read in a younger classroom as a group. Next, we add fun and playful illustrations. This is all Sofia. I love it so much. We have the biographies of each individual interviewee. She takes them and picks out a portion of their story and makes it an illustration for their story. So you can see a couple here. One is a woman who studies the microbiome of salamander skin. So you see a little salamander illustration. The other is a woman who worked on the Cassini spacecraft that studied this Saturn and its rings. So you see an illustration of that as well. Another design feature that most of the ebooks have is a past, present, future sections. This allows us to really highlight people who were the foundations of fields, but also highlight professionals who are at the top of their field now and early career professionals who we are looking forward to following in the future. Finally, we want the ebooks and videos to be accessible in a variety of languages. The video series is in Spanish and English, as well as Spanish and English captioned. And the ebook series, depending on which ebook, is available in at least one other language and up to 10 other languages. This really allows us to meet students where they are, whether English proficiency is a little lower or they take it home to their family and English is not their primary language at home. We really want everyone to be able to access these. Next slide, thank you. So production and dissemination of the ebooks and videos are really geared towards reaching as many people as possible. They are both organized as short stories, so you're getting little vignettes of people's careers and life, as well as very short stories. So it's easily digestible, can be paused, come back to it, read one of the stories, come back later and read the rest. The stories in the ebooks are about one single Word document page, but it's spread out into 2 to 4 ebook pages with photos and illustrations. The videos are 10 to 12 minutes long, featuring 3 women each, so you get about 2 to 5 minutes on each woman's story. And it really allows a very absorbable amount of information in a short amount of time. They can be played in classrooms or watched at home. You're not using all of your battery to get through an ebook or a video series. And next, the ebook series and video series are freely available. And that's really important to us, that we're not charging for any of these. Anyone can download them, anyone can access them. They're available for download on our website. You can download the PDF, you can print it, you could read it at home, take it offline. You can also download the ebooks from Apple Books, and the video series is also available on YouTube. So you can watch it wherever you prefer to watch your YouTube videos. And now I will hand it back to Logan.
Thank you for joining us. This concludes our session, Think Digitally, Art, Design, and Digital Experiences. We encourage you to connect with us and reach out with any questions. And if you or any of the students in your lives are interested in joining us for playtesting, one of our games and digital experiences, please follow this QR code and register to join us in testing opportunities and future events. Thank you.